Hi, we're going to start talking about synthetic division. Synthetic division is a shorter method of dividing two polynomials, and we can only use it in some cases. We can only use it with certain divisors. In this case, it says that we can only use it if the divisor is of this form. If we have x minus k, k is any constant number. What it means is that if my divisor looks like, for example, x minus 2, or x plus 3, or I can have a divisor that's 3x plus 2. These are all linear terms, and what that means is that all my x's in these polynomials have an exponent of 1, or we can also say that these are degree 1 polynomials. So as long as I have degree 1 polynomials as my divisor, I can use this technique. If my divisor were, for example, x squared plus 5, if this was my divisor, I can't use synthetic division with a divisor like this one. That's a quadratic divisor, okay? Only when it's linear or a degree 1. So in this case, I have this polynomial divided by this divisor, which is x minus 1. That tells me I can use synthetic division. And to use synthetic division, the first thing you do is you're going to write numbers in this first row here. I have this symbol here is like an upside down division symbol. I'm going to have a first row, and this first row is going to be filled with the coefficients of the terms in my dividend. So this first number here, my first coefficient is a 3. I'm going to write a 3 there. The next one, and make sure, before you continue, make sure that this is written in standard form, and make sure that all the terms are there. If they're missing terms, then you have to fill them in with zeros. Let's check. I have 3, 2, 1, 0. That means I didn't skip any terms. So I can go ahead and write my next coefficient, which is 9. The next coefficient is negative 5. And the next one is negative 15. This last term. We always grab the symbol that's in front of any term, okay? I've written down the coefficients of my dividend. Now I'm going to write my divisor in this space out here. How do I find my divisor? This is your divisor, x minus 1. What we do here is we solve for x. We equal the divisor to 0, and we add, in this case, we add 1 to both sides, and we get that x equals 1. That 1 that we just found, that's going to be my divisor in synthetic division. Okay? Okay, we've got all our numbers where they belong. Let's start dividing. The first thing you do is you take this first coefficient and you bring it straight down. You do nothing to it, you just bring it down. Once this number is down here, you take this 3 and you multiply it by the divisor. You take 3 and you multiply it by 1 and you get a 3. Where do I write that 3? I'm going to write it underneath my next coefficient. Okay? Second step, add these two numbers. 9 plus 3, 12. Anytime I finish adding, I start all over again and I take this number and multiply it times 1. So 12 times 1, 12. And I write it underneath the next coefficient. Then I add negative 5 plus 12, that gives you positive 7. 7 times 1, 7. And then you add negative 15 plus 7, that's negative 8. And we're done with synthetic division. I always box off this last number because this last number is my remainder. These numbers here represent the coefficients of my quotient. So how do we know which of these coefficients belongs to my x term or to my x squared term, or which of these is a constant in my polynomial? And what you do is, for example, in this, I'm going to use this as an example. Notice that when we go from right to left, the first number I encounter in my polynomial, in the standard form of a polynomial, is my constant term. So the first term I'm going to encounter when I move from right to left here is my constant term. So I know the 7 is my constant term. The second term I encounter is my x term. So I know this 12 is going to be my x term. The next number I encounter is my x squared term. So I know that this number here is the coefficient of my x squared term. And if we had any other numbers, we would go increasing from x to x squared to x cubed, x to the fourth power, x to the fifth, etc. So be very careful here. We're going to work from right to left. The first number we encounter is always going to be our constant term. The next number is the coefficient of my x to the first power term. The next number is the coefficient of my x to the second power term. And if I had another number here, that would be the coefficient of my x to the third power term. So here's how my quotient is going to look. Let's write q of x. This is just a label saying that I use q for quotient. And this function notation just tells me that this is a function. So here's my answer. This would be 3, my coefficient, and it belongs to my x squared term, plus 12. Why plus 12? Because this 12 is positive. Plus 12, coefficient of who? Of my x term. And plus 7, which is my constant term. That means there's no x with the 7. And my remainder, I can write this as a function also. My remainder is negative 8. Okay, so there's your answer. When you divide this polynomial by this divisor, this is what you get. You get this quotient and a remainder of negative 8. And you know what we can do? We can go ahead and check this, right? We can check this answer by multiplying the quotient by the divisor and adding the remainder. Sorry. So we said that this is equal, this division, if we want to check it here, this division is equal to my quotient plus I had a remainder also. And the quotient we found was 3x squared plus 12x plus 7, and we had a remainder of negative 8. So how do we check this? Remember that to get my dividend, when we use the division algorithm, we say that the dividend is going to equal the quotient times the divisor plus the remainder. So let's do that. The dividend is equal to the quotient. We found that our quotient is 3x squared plus 12x plus 7 times our divisor, which is x minus 1, and we're going to add negative 8. So let's multiply each term. 3x squared times x, that gives you 3x cubed. 3x squared times negative 1, negative 3x squared. 12, then we start with the other term. 12x times x, that gives you 12x squared. And 12x times negative 1 is negative 12x. 7 times x is 7x. And 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. And we add our remainder. Now we combine like terms, and I get 3x cubed plus 9x squared minus 5x, right? Because negative 12x plus 7x gives you negative 5x. And negative 7 minus 8, that is equal to negative 15. And there's your check. You got your dividend. So that means that the division we did with synthetic division worked. We got the right answer. If you want to do long division when you have a linear divisor, you can do that. You will get the same answer. It doesn't matter if you use long or synthetic division. But when you do notice that your divisor is a linear term, you can take advantage of the synthetic division and do it that way instead of doing long division. But both will work. Okay? And this is the end of this example. We have another example here with synthetic division. Let's set this up. We have an upside down division symbol. In here we're going to write the coefficients of my dividend, which is 3, 4, -4. And notice here that we skip the squared term. We have 5, 4, 3. We don't have a 2. We do have a 1 and a 0. So fill in this space here with a 0 for that squared term that we're skipping. And then we have a 5 and then 10. And out here as a divisor, what we're going to do is we take our divisor right here and we solve for x. And that means I subtract 2 from each side, so x is -2. This number is my divisor down here. First step, bring down that first term. 3, multiply 3 times -2, that gives you -6. Then you add these two. 4 plus -6 is -2. Multiply -2 times -2, that's -4. I mean +4. And then -4 plus 4, that gives you a 0. Multiply 0 times -2, you get 0. And 0 plus 0 is 0. And then 0 times -2 is 0. And 5 plus 0 is 5. And 5 times -2 is -10. And 10 plus -10 is 0. Remember, you box off that last number because this is our remainder. And again, if we go from right to left, the first number we encounter is our constant term. This is my x term, my x squared term, my x cubed term, and my x to the 4th term. So my quotient looks like this. 3x to the 4th power minus 2x to the 3rd power plus 5. These two terms are 0, so they don't belong in my polynomial. The remainder is 0, so I don't get a remainder. When you have a remainder of 0, that means that this divisor divides evenly into this polynomial. That means that this number, this divisor here, is a factor of this dividend. Let's talk more about factors and remainders. When your remainder is 0, like we said, that means that a number divides evenly into another. For example, if I have 12 divided by 3, I get a 4, and my remainder is 0. That means that 4 and 3 are factors of 12. And what are factors? Factors are numbers that you multiply together and get another number. So if I multiply 3 times 4, I get 12. That means 3 and 4 are factors of 12. In this case, the quotient and the divisor are factors of the dividend, right? If we use the correct vocabulary here. And this happens with any two numbers you multiply together. This is only true when the remainder is 0. When it's not 0, for example, if I divide 3 into 13, I get this. I get a remainder of 1. So I can't say that 4 and 3 are factors of 13, because if I say they are factors, that means if I multiply these two numbers, I get the dividend. And I don't. If I multiply 4 times 3, I don't get 13. So that tells me they are not factors of 13. 4 times 3 is 12, not 13. In this example, 4 times 3 gets me the dividend, 12. So that means 4 and 3, or the quotient and the divisor, are factors of the dividend. When I do have a remainder, this statement is not true. The quotient and the divisor will not be factors of the dividend. So you will see some problems where they will ask you, let's say instead of saying use synthetic division to find the quotient and the remainder, it's going to say show that the divisor is a factor. And a way to do that is dividing. When you divide, if you get a remainder of 0, then that tells you that it is a factor of this dividend. If you do not get a remainder of 0, then the divisor, or this term here, is not a factor of your dividend. We'll talk more about this in class. I hope this has cleared up a lot of your doubts. Keep practicing. See you.